All right, it's Sunday afternoon, June 30th. The dust has settled a little bit on free agency for the last little while, and I saw a lot of questions during the day about uh, how the trades were going to work, how the free agent acquisitions were going to work. Specifically, questions like, but wait, I thought that the Jazz could go over the cap to sign their own free agents, and so why are they losing Derek Favors? Some other things. So I thought I'd walk through exactly what's happening in free agency. Technically, right at this moment, nothing has happened at all. We're still in the free agency moratorium period. Really, the roster and the cap figure that exists for the Jazz at this moment is the same as existed, this morning on June 30th, prior to 6 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. Um, this is what that would have looked like. You would have seen 15 players on the team. A few of those players non-guaranteed: Derek Favors, Kyle Korver, Hal Neto, and both Niang and O'Neal. And a couple of these players, Ricky Rubio, Tavo Cephalosha, and Epe Udo, are all free agent cap holds. They're not really on the team. They're free agents. They're not. I should say they're not on the team going forward into the future. This is how you basically maintain the right to say they are our own player. Clearly, they were in the past, but this is how you keep the rights to be able to go over the cap for them. Is you have to keep this hold figure on your cap sheet until you either resign them and put a new value in there that's the actual value of the new contract, or renounce them, which is saying we don't want to. We're not going to keep the rights to this player. Or I guess the third way to get rid of the cap hold is you don't renounce them, but one of those players signs with another team. At that point, they are no longer on your cap sheet because that's the same effect as renouncing them. Clearly, they're not coming back. They just signed with another team. So we have the 15 players. We have one first round pick's draft rights from the number 23 pick. We also have, at this moment, before anything changes, snapshot in time, we have the full taxpayer mid-level exception and biannual exception. You can see those individual numbers up here. They're not really going to matter to the Jazz because they're going to be gone real soon anyway, but I put them on here because just for completeness sake. And finally, they have traded player exception. This is the $4 million TPE they earned by trading $11.5 million in Alec Burks' salary out and only receiving $7.5 million in Kyle Korver's salary back in. They could have found a trade for somebody who fit into that slot and not had to, give away salary to get it if they were operating as an over-the-cap team. Again, this is going to go away, spoiler alert, because they're going to be operating as an under-the-cap team. So hopefully that sets the picture for where the Jazz were starting, or technically still are at this moment. And then we're going to start to step through what they're going to do on Saturday, July 6th, or soon thereafter. Deals don't all get done just immediately as they can be done. They get recorded, because the league's got whatever 2, 3, 5 deals per team to process. So it takes some time. I don't know how they decide who goes first. The first step, though, that the Jazz are going to take, and any team takes if they're going to be an under the cap team, is they clear the rights to anybody they're not planning to keep on the team, or who they might plan to keep on the team, but they're not planning to retain their rights. So again, if you don't retain these players' rights, that means obviously they were your player in the past, but they're not what the kind of colloquial term is. They're our own player. We're going to clear the rights to any player that we don't want to be our own player in the future and have the rights to go over the cap to retain. And that's going to be Ricky Rubio, Cephalosha, and Udo. Those rights are going to be renounced, and the Jazz are going to drop from the amount they were over the cap. In fact, I'm going to step back to, you see, before we started doing this, just for the cap sheet number during the offseason, the Jazz were $36 million over the salary cap. Clearly they weren't, because these exceptions were not even used yet, but that's for an offseason calculation. That's how it works. They were $36 million over the cap. So the only way to use cap space is to clear some space. So we did that. We took out Rubio and we took out Cephalosha and Udo. Okay. So you see there's still $2.6 million over the cap. To get under the cap, you also have to release the majority of your exceptions. You have to release your non-taxpayer or taxpayer mid-level exception. In the Jazz case, it was the non-taxpayer mid-level exception. And you have to renounce your biannual exception. So that's gone, and the traded player exceptions. You can't hang on to those and go under the cap. So at this point, the Jazz have $14 million under the cap. Now, as you probably know, that's not enough to go out and sign Bogdanovich. That's certainly not enough to absorb, it's close to enough to absorb Mike Conley's salary, given the players they were also sending out. So actually, let's do this. Let's first step through how, before the Bogdanovich situation became a thing today or yesterday, let's step through how the Jazz were going to make the Conley trade. So at this point, we've cleared 3 players free agent cap holds, and we've cleared all the exceptions. We have no exceptions left. We will later, because we're a cap team, we will later have just the room mid-level exception. That's the exception for teams that go under the cap, fill back up to the cap, then they get this. Okay. So the Jazz have the $14 million. Here's how we thought the Conley trade was going to work, and recent developments have changed this a little bit. First of all, the Jazz were going to bring in Conley's salary, which was $32,511,623. At the same time, they were going to be sending out Korver, Crowder, Allen, and that pick. Okay. This was going to leave them just a little short. You can actually go 100,000 higher than this. So they were going to be about 293K, 294K short of being able to make this deal work. They were going to have, because as soon as they got down to these 10 players, 2 incomplete roster charges jumped on there. That's 2 slots at this rookie minimum, because you have to have at least 13 players. If you have less than 12, you get penalized for going under 12, because they know you're going to have to pick those players up later, at least at that amount. Okay. So the Jazz were not going to be able to make the trade without doing something else. So are they going to release Rudy Gobert? No, of course they're not. Are they going to release, you go on down the list, most likely they were going to have to release Raul Neto. And then that trade would have gone through, and you see as soon as they did that, now we had 3 incomplete roster charges because we were down to only 9 players on the roster. Okay, that was how it was going to work, and all along, those of us out on Twitter who stress about these things were saying, yeah, they had to give up 3 players and a draft pick to get Conley. They're probably going to have to give up a 4th player. That didn't really, or that still could happen. They still could release Raul Neto, but they won't have to now. So let's take this back a little bit to where we're back to, we don't have Conley on here yet. The NBA generally lets teams order transactions coming out of the moratorium in whatever order they want. And so, of course, teams do that in the order that is most advantageous to them. So here's what happened today. The Utah Jazz agreed to a deal with Bojan Bogdonavic. That's basically going to take Derek Favors' cap space. He'll be slightly cheaper, though. So Derek Favors was here. He was on a non-guaranteed contract, which means as long as he is waived before July 6th, his salary will not count at all in the coming year. In addition, I haven't seen this written, but just working through it logically, they would also need to then renounce his rights. They can't keep that foot in the door to re-sign Favors later over the cap if they're going to use his space. It's one or the other. You can have the cap space, or you can retain the rights to Derek Favors. You can't have both. That's the answer to that question that I saw out on Twitter after kind of all the dust was settling and everybody was thinking, wait, what? Why do we have to give up Favors? I've read for years that you can go over the cap to keep your own free agents. So here's what the Jazz are going to do during the next several days. They're going to waive Derek Favors or trade him into somebody else's cap space. And actually, that's a that's a separate point. But somehow they will waive and renounce Derek Favors or trade him into somebody else's cap space, but he will either way be off the books. The indications we have are that Bogdanovic is going to be a $17 million player. Sorry, I've got one that's formatted if I do it the right way. Okay, he will be a $17 million player, so that's easy. The Jazz are still under the cap by that much. And what you might have noticed is, oops, went too far. What you might have noticed is Derek Favors made $17.65 million. Bogdanovic going to make $17 million. They saved $650 million right there. That's going to make the difference in whether they have to release Halmedo or not. So let's step through that second trade again. So at this point, I'm going to walk through this one more time. They have released or renounced the cap holds on the 3 free agents. They have released their exceptions. Those don't come back. Now they either waived and renounced Derek Favors or traded him into somebody else's cap space. Either way, they got him off their cap sheet and they brought in Bogdanovic. Now we're going to do the same exercise we did before. We're going to bring in Mike Conley's cap space, and we're going to take out Kyle Korver, Jay Crowder, Grayson Allen, and the 23 pick. We still have 2 minimum incomplete roster charges because we still have 10 players under contract or withholds. In this case, they are all under contract at this point. But we're now under the cap. The cap, you'll remember, is $109,140,000. They're under it. From this point, the Jazz will have up to 5 roster spots to fill, plus potentially 2 two-way spots to fill. The way they will do that is they'll use the room mid-level exception. I mentioned this before. This is the mid-level exception that's available to those teams who have gone below the cap, spent back up to the cap, and now they want this. This can be maximum a 2-year contract. And then after that, they will be using minimum salary contracts. The way this works is if you get a rookie, you will you can pay the minimum is that. A 1-year veteran is that. Anybody who's a 2-year veteran or more, there's a scale that you pay them a little higher, but only the $1.62 million there applies to your cap sheet. You get kind of incentivized for taking on a more veteran player. You only get charged on your cap sheet for that amount. One last thing I was going to mention earlier and didn't. The second round picks, the Jazz still have the rights to them. They do not have a cap hold, so they're just kind of out of this discussion. That's why I kind of just had them off to the side here. They don't hurt your cap sheet at that point. So I would expect that this is where the Jazz will sit by sometime next Saturday, Sunday, as these deals get processed. By then, my guess is they will also have an 11th name in here that'll be a room mid-level exception. And if the Jazz are lucky, they'll be able to find another contributor or two, not a set the world on fire guy, but somebody who'll come in for the minimum and play for them, especially now that they look like a pretty talented team on paper that could make some noise in the NBA next year. These guys most likely would be, an end-of-the-bench rookie minimum guy or two-way guys, or if things aren't working great right now and they need some additional development, maybe one or more of them goes over to Europe. The Jazz keep their rights and can bring them back in a future year. So that's what I got for you. Hopefully that makes a little bit of sense, seeing it kind of step through. Let me know on Twitter. What is my handle? At @KClate with an underscore, at @K_Clate on Twitter if you have any questions. Take care.